This is Gemara Nedarim Daf Samoch Dalid. As we embark in a new parak, the 9th parak in Nedarim. All the learning for this month has been generously sponsored by a close friend of the Daf, as a schos ili neshama for Rav Aryeh ben Rav Yaakov. B'siyata d'shmaya, the learning of the entire Chabura should bring Rav Aryeh ben Rav Yaakov, a yid who's probably learning in Bezin Shalmaila with Rav Naftali Trupp right now, higher in Gan Eden Shalmaila, and closer to the Kisei HaKavod. So we're holding on, Samach Daled Amud Aleph, another parak, Rav Eliezer. What do I mean by another parak? Rav Eliezer is quite the famous name in Shas lore. We've learned in Masechah Shabbos, 2 parakim that have the name Rav Eliezer. And here is another. Of course, Rav Eliezer Demila in Shabbos being the most famous. So that's number one. Number two is, as we embark on the final, we really could call it the final home stretch, the last less than a month of Maseches Nedarim, we shift gears right now. Until now, we've been figuring out what is a neder, what is included in a neder. Now we go into the halachas of how to be poiseach in a neder, how to be meifir and matir a neder. The difference between meifir and matir being whether you are annulling the now from now and going forth, or whether you are undoing the vow, showing that it was all done b'tayis, or you didn't know all the relevant details, etc., and thereby undoing it back from the time the neder was created. So says the Mishnah, Rav Eliezer Omer teaches Rav Eliezer, Poischin la'adam b'chavod avav v'imay. One is allowed to be poiseach. It is considered a good Pesach to undo a neder if he is concerned for the honor, the kavod of his avid and his imay. What's the honor? So we quickly look at the Ran. The Duran says, if you know that they're going to be mavazi your parents due to that you, their son, is acting in a callous, a low manner with regard to Nedarim, why Dikari Rishia bar tzadika or Rishia bar Rishia? Kloma yisi neder. We just read the top Ran. Would you have made such a neder? So says Rav Eliezer, that is a good Pesach. If we were to ask him, if you knew this, would you have made a neder? And he says, no, that is a good Pesach and it undoes a neder. V'chachamim oisrim. Say the Chachamim, no. The Gemara is going to explain what exactly that means. But say the Chachamim, based on the kavod of an imay, we cannot undo a neder. Amar Rav Sadik, says Rav Sadik, which seemingly is going back on the Shita Rishayna of the Rav Eliezer that taught you could yes be poiseach with a neder. Says Rav Sadik, says Rav Eliezer, just as you can undo a neder based on the honor of the father and mother, so too you could undo a neder based on the kavod of the hamakayim of Hashem. Similar, if you tell the person, if you were to know that kol neder kilubana bama, if you were to know that making a neder is not considered desirous in the eyes of Hashem, would you have made such a neder? And if he says no, that as well is considered a Pesach. So Rav Sadik explains that just like Rav Eliezer is mekel with regard to a neder, if he says that due to the honor of my father and mother I would not have made it, so too if he says due to the honor of Hashem. So now says the Mishnah, or some Girsayis have Omar Loi, that the Chachamim retort back to Rav Eliezer, to the Rav Tzadik's expansion of Rav Eliezer. Im Kain, Ein in Nedarim, based on what you just said, if we could potentially have a Pesach that if I knew that Hashem wasn't happy, I wouldn't have made the neder, we would never have such Nedarim. So that's why the Chachamim seemingly hold that in both cases is not a good Pesach. Continues the Mishnah, 5 lines down, Samach Daled Amud Aleph. Moedim Chachamim Rav Eliezer Chachamim are moedeh bedavar shebeinai lebein aviv v'imai. Even though the Chachamim said it is not a good Pesach to say kaviv avid v'imai, but say the Chachamim, if it's a private matter of kavod aviv and imay, if it's something that's between him and his parents, as the Ran explains, what's a classical case? He makes a neder that he doesn't want his parents to have any benefit from his property. In such a story, says the Chachamim, they will be maschim to Rav Eliezer that this is yes, that in this scenario, you could utilize this as a Pesach to undo the neder. In this scenario, what does his neder do? It doesn't allow him to provide for his parents. So we say to him, if he would have known that meeting neder, if you would have known that to provide for your parents is a din d'oraisa, then it, yes, will be a good Pesach. Again, what's a Pesach? A Pesach is, we tell him, if you knew this, would you have done it? And he says, oh no. If I knew that, I would not have done it. Then it's a good Pesach. So the Chachamim agreed to Rav Eliezer that if it's a private matter between him and his parents, it's yes, a good Pesach. Let's just look at the Ran for one more moment. That Ran that we just highlighted, the Ran 6 lines into the narrow lines explains Kiloimar. No, excuse me, that's not the right Ran. Excuse me. That is absolutely not the right Ran. The Ran we're talking about is later on in the Ran. Okay, let's leave the Ran, because the Ran really incorporates the Gemara in his explanation. So for the moment, let's leave the Ran. Let's continue in the Mishnah. 7 lines into the Mishnah. Vaydam Rav Eliezer, continues Rav Eliezer. Poischin bin noilad. We're allowed to utilize a noilad, something which did not exist at the time of the neder. That's still a good avenue as a Pesach to undo a neder. Explains the Mishnah. He says, I make a neder, I'm not getting any benefit from a certain person. Ve'na says Seifer, and that person becomes a Seifer. And he's like, oh shoot, if I would have known, I need mezuzahs, I need a Sefer Torah. So he wants to undo the neder. Or that person is marrying off his son. Va'amar, and the person that made the neder is saying, Sefer would have known he became a Sefer. Would have known he's making a chasana and paying for it. B'karav recently. Whenever I made a neder, that is a case of Paischin bin Noilad, a new development that happens. At the time that he made the neder, the person was not a Sefer. That only came later on, and that still is a good Pesach. Continues the Mishnah. If someone makes a neder, I won't enter into this house. And look at that house was sold and bought as a shul. Amar, and he says, if I would have known that this is another example of Paischin bin Noilad, another example that we could utilize something new as a Pesach, that the fact that it became a shul after he made a neder, that is enough according to Rav Eliezer. We allow new developments to act as a Pesach, whereas the Chachamim disagree. So really 2 parts of the Mishnah. Part A of the Mishnah deals with whether it's a good Pesach to say Kavod Avim v'imai and or Kavod HaMakayim. Part B of the Mishnah deals with a Pesach of Noilad. So says the Gemara, going back on part A of the Mishnah, My ein Nedarim. What does the Mishnah mean? As we read in the Mishnah, Kain ein Nedarim, which seemingly was the Chachamim's retort to Rav Eliezer, or the way that Rav Tzadok expanded Rav Eliezer. That not only is there a Pesach for Kavod Avim v'imai, but there's even a Pesach for Kavod HaMakayim. That if he says, oh, I didn't know that Hashem is so anti-Nedarim. If I would have known it, would have never made the Neder. That will be a good Pesach. And the Chachamim responded, Im Kain ein Nedarim. What does that mean? So 2 explanations. Amar Abaye says, Abaye im Kain ein Nedarim nitzur yafeh. If it's true that you could have a Pesach, that if I would have known Hashem is so anti, that's a good Pesach. Im Kain ein Nedarim nitarim yafeh. You will never be able to be mefer to annul Nedarim properly. Why? Because, as the Ran explains, the concern over here is that a person is not going to have the appropriate azus. He's going to be bashful to admit that even against the will of God, he would have made a neder. Meaning, if we come over to Reuven, say, Reuven, you made a neder. Do you know that Hashem really doesn't like you making Nedarim? So what's Reuven going to say? Oh, I didn't realize. Boom. Says the Chachamim, that's a Pesach. Responds Rav Eliezer and retorts the Mishnah, Im Kain ein Nedarim. Because what's the problem? The problem is, everyone's going to say that. But is it real? What's really a Pesach? That when he finds out that Hashem is anti, when he finds out that they're making fun of his parents, he says, oh, I didn't know. Now that I know, I would have never made the neder. So says the Chachamim, when it comes to Kavod HaMakom. Would anyone actually not say that? Of course not. Everyone's going to say, oh, I didn't know that. But really, it's not true. Really, that's not the way that he necessarily feels. Just he's ashamed to admit in front of a chacham when he comes to be made for the neder that even though it's against the will of Hashem, he still would have made a neder. And that's the reason why the chacham hold that is not a good Pesach, says Abaye. We turn over to Samach Dalet and Beis, and the Gemara continues. The Rava Amar, that's the teretz of Abaye. Comes along Rava and he says, Im kein Nedarim, that what? Nishalim the Chacham. We're never going to have a neder that's Nishal Chacham. If every neder is a good reason, if it's a good reason to say, oh, if I knew that Hashem was upset, if I knew that my parents would be dishonored as enough of a Pesach, no one is ever going to go and ask a Chacham because he's able to seemingly do it on his own. And the Mefarish over here speaks out, so what's the problem? What's the problem if he does it on his own? It says in the first 3 lines down that the Torah says, Lo yachel devarai. And from there we learn out that he cannot be meichel, but other ones could. Meaning there is an entity of hafara by a chacham. And if we were to undo that whole entity, it can't be. So 2 different answers, Abaye and Rava, how to explain the question of the chacham in the Mishnah to Rav Eliezer, as Rav Sadik expanded the din of Rav Eliezer to include even Kavod HaMakom, why the chacham would disagree. Abaye, because no one would have the chutzpah. Rava, because you'll never have anyone coming to a chacham. So says the Gemara Tanan, let's bring a raya to Abaye. Second line, or when the chacham and the Rebbe Eliezer, so says the Gemara, in classical Gemara form, let's use the next case of the Mishnah. The case of the Mishnah, in which the Mishnah explained that the chachamim are moideh, that in this case, it is a good Pesach. Let's use this to explain the machlokes. In the Mishnah, the Chachamim agreed to Eliezer a neder that is beino lebein atzmai. It is a good Pesach. Says the Gemara 3 lines down. Such a neder he could use a Pesach for covered aviv or imay. So explains the Gemara. According to Abaye, what's the whole concern? That when it comes to Kavod HaMakom, everyone's going to lie. No one's going to have the ha'azah to say, oh yeah, I would never have said this in front of Hashem. And oh, if I knew Hashem was so upset, I would never have done it. So says the Gemara, in this case, since he clearly has chutzpah, this man. Why does he clearly have chutzpah? Because he's making a neder connected his father and mother. They cannot enter his property. So once we find that this person has chutzpah, he obviously has the chutzpah, so we have to be afraid he's going to lie. And that's the reason why in this case the chacham would be moided to Rav Eliezer. But according to Rava, what's the difference in this case? Excuse me. So what's the difference in this case? So the Gemara proves from the next case in the Mishnah, seemingly to the din of Abaye, that it has to do with ha'azah, it has to do with having the appropriate chutzpah. But according to Rava, we can't understand what would the difference be in this case. What would the difference be in this case of a neder that's beinai, bein aviv v'imai? Answers the Gemara 8 lines down. First line is Paischin. Amri, they said, since every other neder in the world would require a chacham, this case he would also use a chacham. So even though you're right, seemingly the Gemara caves in, but since it's such a minority case, it's not something that we have to be concerned about. We continue about 10 lines down to the 2 dots, which we quote the next segment of the Mishnah. And the Chacham said you cannot. Says the Gemara, my time of Rav Eliezer, where does Rav Eliezer say the din that you're allowed to, yes, be Paisach v'noilad? If the man subsequently, if the house becomes a shul, if the man subsequently has gets marrying off his son, you could, yes, be made for the neder based on that. Where does Rav Eliezer know this din? Amar Rav Chizd Amar Kra Ki Mesu Kol Anashim. The pasuk discusses Moshe and Midian, and Moshe Rabbeinu was told to go back to Mitzrayim because everyone, by dozen Avirim, after he killed the man, they tell Moshe that everyone that wants to seek your life, everyone wants to kill you, have died. Says the Gemara, V'amisa denaylehu. So even though Moshe Rabbeinu made an eder, And Misa is a new entity. Still, it was able to make Moshe be annulled and be released from his neder. Mikan shabayschem inoila, that Shita's Rav Eliezer. V'chachamim oimrim v'rabbanan ma'itay. What do the Rabbanan do? You cannot kesavri hanu mi maisu. Say the Chachamim, I don't understand what's going on in this story. Are these people, the people that want to kill Moshe, did they really die? What do you mean? V'amar Rav Yechon v'Shimon Yochanan, Yochanan says the name of Shimon Yochai. Kol makom shenemar nitzim v'nitzavim. Ein doesn't Rav Aaron. So we find later on in Chumash that Dasan and Aviram are indeed alive, and they were the ones that sought after Moshe's life. So why are you telling me everyone died? Ella, Amar Reish Lakish explained to Reish Lakish that what does it mean that they died? 10 lines to the bottom. First one line is Sheyardu. It means Sheyardu meinich seyem. It means that they lost all their money. Remember, if Shua ben Levi called them Shein lo banim chashiv kimesh. Remember, havali banim v'mayin meisa anayich. Without children, one is considered dead. Anya harba chashivin kimesh. 4 people are considered like they're dead. Ani Matera V'Suma, one who's blind, Misha Lo Banim doesn't have kids. Ani Dilsev Kimis Kol Nashim Matera Dilsev Al Nati Kimis V'Suma Dilsev K'mach Shakim Boshivani Kimis Yoilam Umisha Lo Banim Dilsev Havli Banim V'Mayin Mesa Noichi. So we conclude with Gemara teaching us that it is no question from the case of Moshe Rabbeinu, and indeed the Raya is a good Raya. That we wanted to ask, that what do you mean? We see from Moshe Rabbeinu, we see from Moshe Rabbeinu that Kol Makom, that it says Nitzim and Nitzavim is Dasav Aviram. So it says, one more time. Let's rewind for 1 second. Says the Gemara Nachmal, what is the Raya? To Rav Eliezer, you could be Yezvi Pesach B'Noilad, from the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu was told because the people that sought after your life are dead, you're annulled from your neder. The Chachamim argued, and the Chachamim said it because it's not true that in reality, Dasan Aviyam are, yes, still alive. We'll pick it up from Daf Samach Hey Amud Aleph for the next year. Psiyata Tishmaya.